want to direct our attention to the book of Job, chapter 6. Job, chapter 6, beginning with verse 1. The word of the Lord is as follows. Then Job spoke again. If my misery could be weighed and my troubles be put on the scales, they would outweigh all the sands of the sea. That is why I spoke impulsively. For the Almighty has struck me down with his arrows. Their poison infects my spirit. God's terrors are lined up against me. Don't I have a right to complain? Don't wild donkeys bray when they find no grass and oxen bellow when they have no food? Don't people complain about unsalted food? Does anyone want the tasteless white of an egg? My appetite disappears when I look at it. I gag at the thought of eating it. Oh, that I might have my request, that God would grant my desire. I wish he would crush me. I wish he would reach out his hand and kill me. At least I can take comfort in this. Despite the pain, I have not denied the words of the Holy One. But I don't have the strength to endure. I have nothing to live for. Thus far, the word of the Lord. I want to zero in on one verse. Don't I have a right to complain? I want to deal with today. This is another one of those words along the way. I want to deal with the right to complain. The right to complain. We have been confronted with some powerful points of examination in our journey towards emotionally healthy discipleship. The first three marks of an emotionally healthy disciple or emotionally healthy discipleship, they were be before you do, follow the crucified, not the Americanized Jesus, and embrace God's gift of limits. And those three have been convicting and challenging. The next one that we'll face this week is equally so. It is discover the treasures buried in grief and loss. The subject of grief and loss has been unavoidable for me in the past 2 weeks while leading a retreat with pastoral sons in ministry utilizing Todd Bolsinger's book, Temperate Resilience. Bolsinger confronted us with the thought that resilient leaders are developed in part by suffering and loss. He writes, and I quote, "So how does a leader develop the tenacity to endure through loss? By intentionally leaning into loss, embracing loss, and even understanding that it is in facing the necessary losses for the desired change that the transformation process begins. Resilience requires a capacity to look the brutal facts square in the eye, to name the mountain of despair, and to keep hammering away with your tempered chisel. For change leaders," he writes, "the practice of addressing the uncomfortable and brutal reality of the suffering of our neighbors and the pain of our friends without losing hope means bring God with the same brutal honesty into our experiences. In biblical language, this is called the spiritual practice of lament. Laments are prayers that face the brutal facts of our world, the pain points of our lives, the challenges of our callings, and invites God right into the swirl of that disturbing moment as the one who is the primary and responsible actor during each crisis. He continues, laments hammer tenacity into us through causing us to learn to trust God in the middle of the leadership crucible. They teach us to be more honest and more open to the reality that God is at work even when we are bewildered and bedeviled by the brutality of pain and opposition. By acknowledging the brutal facts of a situation and letting them lead us into prayers of lament, we galvanize the energy that brings resilience, reinforces even the smallest movement of momentum, and staves off cynicism. He concludes, laments are acts of faith that strengthen the one praying for faithful, persistent, and tenacious action. We find Job in the midst of such a crucible. Without warning, he goes from the top of the world to the bottom, falling out. While he initially responds with defiant worship, declaring we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain that we can carry nothing out. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That's in chapter 1. But then chapter 2 and chapter 3 and chapter 4 and chapter 5 happen. And with those succeeding chapters, the cumulative weight of loss begins to bear down on Job. His wife has asked him to curse God and die. Some friends have come and stood silently before him for 7 days, absorbing the tragedy that is his lot. As they consider where he was and look at where he is now, they are so stricken that they stand there, they stay there for 7 days, unable to say a word. And in chapter 3, Job breaks radio silence with the following words: let the day of my birth be erased, and the night I was conceived. Let that day be turned to darkness. Let it be lost even to God on high, and let no light shine on it. Let the darkness and utter gloom claim that day for its own. Let a black cloud overshadow it, and let darkness terrify it. Why wasn't I born dead? Why didn't I die as I came from the womb? Why was I laid on my mother's lap? Why did she nurse me at her breast? Had I died at birth, I would now be at peace. I would be asleep and at rest. Oh, why give light to those in misery and life to those who are bitter? They long for death, and it won't come. They search for death more eagerly than for hidden treasure. They are filled with joy when they finally die, and rejoice when they find the grave. Why is life given to those with no future, those God has surrounded with difficulties? What I always feared has happened to me. What I dreaded has come true. I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest. Only trouble comes. There is Job expressing the cumulative weight of his suffering and his loss. Eliphaz is the first of the friends now to respond to Job in chapters 4 and 5. Eliphaz begins with the following words in chapter 4. Will you be patient and let me say a word? For who could keep from speaking out? In the past, you have encouraged many people. You have strengthened those who were weak. Your words have supported those who were failing. You encouraged those with shaky knees. But now, when trouble strikes, you lose heart. You are terrified when it touches you. Doesn't your reverence for God give you confidence? Doesn't your life of integrity give you hope? Stop and think. Do the innocent die? When have the upright been destroyed? My experience shows that those who plant trouble and cultivate evil will harvest the same. A breath from God destroys them. They vanish in a blast of his anger. Disquieted by Job's condition, Eliphaz is further disturbed by Job's words. And his discomfort prompts him to wrongly assume the role of God's defender. He seeks to silence Job's voice due to his dis-ease with the thoughts that Job was speaking. You see, friends, it is often the case that the combined discomfort with senseless situations that are seen and painful words that are heard prompt people to feel the need to defend God by squelching the thoughts and feelings of others. Unable to fully absorb or discern what they see and hear, they resort to blaming the person who suffers in the attempt to exonerate God. In Eliphaz's calculus, God blesses the righteous. God punishes the unrighteous. And therefore, suffering must be due to Job having done something wrong. Because there is no way that someone living a righteous life should encounter or experience the level of loss that Job has experienced. That's his calculus, and for him, psychologically and emotionally, that has to be the case, because if Job has lived a righteous life and has suffered the way that he is suffering now, having done nothing wrong, then what might that say for him as well? And so his attempt to exonerate God is also, in some measure, an attempt to try to assure that that level of suffering and pain will not come his own way. Now, while God would later confront Eliphaz and the others about their ineptitude in chapter 42, verses 7 and 8, listen to God correct them all. After the Lord had finished speaking to Job, he said to Eliphaz the Temanite, I'm angry with you and your two friends, for you have not spoken accurately about me as my servant Job has. So take 7 bulls and 7 rams and go to my servant Job and offer a burnt offering for yourselves. My servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer on your behalf. I will not treat you as you deserve, for you have not spoken accurately about me as my servant Job has. God corrects Eliphaz and his other 2 friends who saw themselves as defenders of God as having misrepresented God. They did not speak accurately about God as Job had. Job was more on target than they were. And God says, here's how I'm going to show you how off base you are. I want you to make a sacrifice, but I'm going to have Job pray for you. And I will accept his prayer on your behalf. And while it takes God from chapter 4 to chapter 30 to chapter 42 to correct Eliphaz, Job can't wait that long. He can't wait all those chapters to try to put them in check. And so it's with chapter 6 that Job resists their efforts to silence him by asserting his right to complain. Listen to him again. If my misery could be weighed and my troubles be put on the scales, they would outweigh all the sands of the sea. That is why I spoke impulsively, for the Almighty has struck me down with his arrows. Their poison infects my spirit. God's terrors are lined up against me. Don't I have a right to complain? Don't wild donkeys bray when they find no grass, and oxen bellow when they have no food? Don't people complain about unsalted food? Does anyone want the tasteless white of an egg. Oh, that I might have my request, that God would grant my desire. I wish he would crush me. I wish he would reach out his hand and kill me. At least I can take comfort in this. Despite the pain, I have not denied the words of the Holy One, but I don't have the strength to endure. I have nothing to live for. Do I have the strength of a stone? Is my body made of bronze? No, I'm utterly helpless, without any chance of success. Look at this now, with Eliphaz seeking to uphold God's honor, Job asserts the integrity of creaturely experience. Listen to what he points to. Donkeys bray when they find no grass. Oxen bellow when they have no food. People express dissatisfaction with tasteless food. Yesterday, while trying to fly back to Charlotte on American Airlines, delay after delay after delay after delay, and then them saying that we had a plane coming from Chicago, and the plane flies from Chicago, gets to where we are, people are deplaning, and then they say our flight is canceled. You can believe there were some folk who were complaining whenever there is something that is unforeseen and undeserved or disliked. There is the tendency, the promptness to complain. And with that being the case, how much more should Job raise a flag in the face of the unforeseen and the undeserved? When you are met with the unimaginable that turns you upside down and inside out, the core, cuts you to the core, complaint and lament are always in order. Job asserts that his relationship with God does not eliminate the human experience of suffering and the lament that comes with it. The reality of suffering and loss, along with how you feel about suffering and loss, Job, God teaches us in this book, must be faced with candor and courage. The experience of suffering and loss, along with how you feel about suffering and loss, must be faced with candor and courage. It is being honest about what happened and being honest about how you feel about what happened. For Job, it was the loss of his children, his wealth, his health, his marriage, his status, and his place. Any one of those is significant, but the combination is absolutely unbearable. Job doesn't deny them or the effects upon him. He openly shows it and expresses it. Now, we need to understand the expression of his thoughts and feelings are acts of courage. Because, friends, not only does it take courage to face the brutal realities of life, but also it takes courage to express how you feel about those brutal realities. Courage is not denying the truth of the reality. It's not found in denying the effects upon you. Courage is acknowledging the loss and the loss's impact upon you. It takes no courage to act as if something didn't happen or that something didn't hurt you. It takes tremendous courage to acknowledge the impact of the blow, to admit that the cut is deep, that the pain is real, that the hurt is profound, that the regret is unrelenting. courage is confessing vulnerability and passibility. I just had to let you know that I do know a few words. Impassibility is acting like nothing affects you, that nothing phases you, that nothing hurts or harms you. But passibility is admitting that, yes, I can be hurt. I can be cut. I can feel to the core of my being. And when you admit, when you confess your vulnerability and your passibility, you relieve yourself of the illusion of control. When we acknowledge our vulnerability, we rid ourselves of the illusion of control. And all of us, let's just be honest, all of us would love to be seen as one who has absolute control and is in control of anything and everything. But the truth of the matter is, we are not in control. And lament allows us, expressing our feelings about grief and loss, allows us to rid ourselves of the illusion of control. We weren't in control of the loss. And we're not in control of the feelings that we have about the loss. We don't control hurt. We don't control grief. Neither is subject to the sheer power of our will, our intellect, or our influence. No, we are subject to them. Suffering and loss and grief, they enter our lives uninvited, unwelcome, feared, and regretted. And consequently, we not only wish that we didn't experience the loss, but also that we didn't feel the way that we feel about the loss. We wish that we didn't hurt as deeply and cry as often. We wish that we weren't helpless. We wish that we didn't feel useless. We wish that we weren't powerless. We wish that we didn't feel unprotected. Nobody likes feeling exposed or subject to that against which there is no control. Yet suffering and loss produce those feelings, and they must be faced with candor and courage. What have you not been admitting? What have you not been acknowledging? What have you been trying to put in a false front and an illusion that it did not affect you, that it did not hurt you, that it did not impact you, that it did not go beneath the skin? Whatever that is, a relationship with God challenges you to face that and how you feel about that with candor and courage. Job does not hide how he feels about what has happened. His misery is overwhelming. It has reached the point where Job desires, listen to this, where Job desires for God to take him out. And his rationale has a particular type of logic. His rationale is that if God were to take him now, he would die still having honored God. He says, despite, I would have this comfort, despite the pain, I would have honored the word of God. While his pain is intense and while his complaint is bitter, he still has not dishonored God. And Job is completely unaware of the conversation that has gone on between God and Satan in heaven, where Satan has made the charge that if I'm allowed the level of access that he would have to Job, that Job would curse God to his face. Job does not know about that conversation, but there's something on the inside of Job that causes him to feel, the one thing I don't want to do is let God down. I don't want to dishonor God. He feels what he feels. He doesn't know how much longer he can hold on. He believes that his capacity to endure is reaching its limit, and he does not want to fail God. And so he'd rather God take him now before he fails God. For the believer, the fear of reaching your limit, the fear of going off the ledge, the fear of failing God can be as frightening a consideration as the experience of loss is. And this is so in part because the thought of God is often the one thing upon which you can hold when everything else is gone. When you cannot depend on anything else to be true, you can depend on God to be true. And when that's the one thing that you have that's holding you together, that's keeping you sane, the last thing you want to do is let him down. With all of Job's losses, there was still the Lord. The Lord was the person whom he feared failing, feeling hopeless, and not seeing any chance of success. He pleads for God. God, take me now. There are times when the realization of our limits, the realization of our finitude, the realization of our exhaustibility can be frightening. It takes candor and courage to admit feelings of helplessness, of futility, that you don't know how much more you can take, how much more you can carry, how much more you can feel, how much more you can cry. And if you've ever been at the edge, if you've ever been at the point where you felt that you've reached the limit, you know how frightening that can be. Because you didn't know what would happen if you were pushed one more inch. If you were poked one more time. If you've ever been at that point, at the edge, when you felt that your limit was just one remark shy of taking you over, and you didn't know how you would respond if just one more thing came at you. You couldn't guarantee where that would send you and if you'd be able to return from wherever it was. And in your mind, it would be better for God to take you than for you to fail God. With as bad as things may seem, the one thing you couldn't bear to do is to fail God as a result. The one person that has never failed you is the one person you don't want to fail. And so Job's request is for God to take him before he fails God. In the pain, before Job reaches his limit. I find interesting that God refuses that request, and he refuses it for two reasons. Reason number one, God knows Job's limit better than Job knows it. And reason number two, God will not let Job be hit beyond his limit. God knows his limit better than Job does, and God will not let Job be hit beyond his limit. Go back to the conversations between God and Satan. God says, have you considered my man Job? He's good and upright man, fears me, hates evil, nothing unrighteous, nothing dark in him at all. Satan says, I tell you what, let me get at him. Does Job serve you for nothing? No, you've given him everything. And that's the reason why he worships you. But if you let me start taking some stuff away from him, he'll curse you to his face, to your face. God says, all right. Chapter 1 happens. Job says, naked came I into this world, naked I shall return. The Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Satan goes back to God. God says, hey, what about Job? And Satan says, well, let's talk real talk. That which I did, that was external to him. You let me attack his body. You let me get at his health. You let me get under his skin. I guarantee you he'll curse you to your face. And God says, all right, but you cannot touch his soul. You cannot touch the essence of his life. God places a limit on Satan's access, on Satan's opportunity. He cannot touch Job's soul. He can attack everything that is external to Job, including his health. But there is a limit. God draws a line. And my brothers and sisters, the line that God draws is where the real limit is. So I got some good news for somebody. God draws lines in the sand. And God's knowledge of your limit is greater than your understanding of your limit. And what this means is, sadly, uncomfortably, there may be more to bear. There may be more to carry. There may be more to experience, but it will never be much more than you can bear. God draws the line. And I hear somebody, I hear somebody saying, because you're looking at me with that attitude all the way through the screen, I can feel you. You're saying you wish that your line was drawn more narrowly so that you would not experience the losses that you've experienced. In other words, couldn't God have drawn the line to exclude the losses you've incurred? Couldn't God have drawn the line to exclude the loss of your child, to exclude the loss of your spouse, to exclude the loss of your sibling, to exclude the loss of a parent, to exclude the loss of a best friend, to exclude the loss of a mentor? Could not God have drawn the lines more narrowly so that you would not have lost your marriage, or that you would not have lost your job, or that you would not have lost the child in pregnancy? Could not God have drawn the line more narrowly to exclude some of the losses that you've incurred? And I can co-sign with those questions. I can co-sign. I wish that my lines of grief and loss were drawn more narrowly. I wish that I didn't experience the loss of a younger brother, or a mother, or a mother-in-law, a father, a cousin, so many beloved members, younger and older than me, those who walked through fire with me. I wish that God had drawn the lines more narrowly so that I would not have experienced some of those losses. But I'm reminded that the narrowness or width of the lines that God draws are not just the narrowness or width of our losses. They are also the narrowness or width of our joys, of our gains, of our blessings, and of the mercies that God allows us to experience. And while my complaint may be with the width of the spaces of my losses, my joy is in the width of the spaces of God's blessing. And God challenges me to understand that I can't have wide lines of blessing and grace and just narrow lines of suffering and loss. That if the lines are wide, for one, I have to realize that there are some things that may come along with that, some losses that may come along with that, some suffering that may come along with that. And it causes me to realize as I look at the lane of my life and its width, I come to understand that the blessings of God, while not blunting the blow of the losses, are far more frequent than the losses. When I look at the lines of my life, I realize that there are more days of blessing than there are days of loss. I realize, as the songwriter put it, my good days outweighed my bad days. I realize that the space of my life, yes, involves some very deep pains and hurts and disappointments, but the lane includes far more than just those. But there's something else that Job reveals concerning lament and complaint. And that is, for every complaint, for every lament, there is a revelation. There's a revelation. Now, to get to this point, you got to read further through Job. Because what you'll discover is there is more than just Job's complaint. There's a lot of back and forth between Job and his friends and Job's complaint and their attempts to exonerate God. And even though Job feels in chapter 6 that he's reached the limit, there are 36 more chapters with Job in chapter 6 telling God, I have no more left. There's nothing left but the possibility of me disappointing you. Take me now. There are 36 chapters that follow chapter 6. And I believe somebody just heard God tell you, you've got more chapters left. I know that you feel that it's up. I know that you might feel that it's done, but there is still more left. You've got more chapters, and it's in the chapters that follow Job's complaints that we see Job receiving a revelation. The revelation begins in chapter 38 and continues through to chapter 42. Job doesn't get any answers to the questions that he raised. Why was he born to suffer? Why is the suffer? He doesn't get any answers to those questions. Instead, he gets a revelation of God and a revelation of himself. My friends, for every complaint, for every lament that you express to God, God will give you a revelation. Now, notice I intently did not say God will give you an answer. I said God will give you a revelation. Because many of us seek to get an answer, such as, why did this happen? Why didn't this happen? Why? And for what reason? And while there may be times when that is revealed, more often than not, it isn't. That nagging question of why my child, why my baby, why my husband, or why that question is not often answered, and we are left with the mystery of human suffering and loss. That big question mark, that nagging question that we can't seem to get an answer. We are left with that mystery. And while that may be a mystery, what God will often reveal is who he is in the midst. He reveals himself to be the one who is both beyond it and who is also within it. And so, friends, I've got to let you know, you may not get an answer to your question, but you will get a revelation for your life. And sometimes it may come immediately. Other times it may take days, it may take weeks, it may take months. Sometimes it might even take years. But there is a revelation for every complaint and every lament that you will have. Job gets his revelation chapters later. He says, take me now. I'm at my limit. I don't want to fail you. That's in chapter 6. God doesn't start revealing until chapter 38. 32 chapters later, God says, let me give you what you really need. God gives him a revelation of his sovereignty as well as a revelation of Job's, dependence, his finitude, his lack of knowledge. God says, gird yourself up like a man. You've been asking questions. Let me start asking the questions. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Can you tell me its length? Can you tell me its measurement? And when God finishes, Job summarizes the revelation at the beginning of chapter 42 with the words, I know that you can do everything, and that no purpose of yours can be withheld from you. You ask, who is this who hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore, I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. Listen, please, and let me speak. You said, I will question you, and you shall answer me. Here it is. I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Lord, have mercy. Therefore, I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes. Job said, I heard of you before, and I lived off of what I heard, but now I've seen you. Now I've gotten a revelation of you that has informed me about who you are and also about who I am. I abhor myself. It's what happened with Isaiah. The year that King Uzziah died, the nation was lamenting. They were complaining, and Isaiah was one of them. But in that year, he found himself in the very presence of the Lord. He said, I also saw the Lord high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. He got a revelation from the Lord. For every complaint, for every lament, God will give you a revelation. Do you see Mary and Martha? Do you see them having sent a prayer out to Jesus after having all of the saints on the prayer line praying that Lazarus might get well? They sent a direct email, instant message to Jesus that the one whom thou lovest is sick. And Jesus gives them no reply, does not show up, does not send flowers even to the funeral. It's 4 days after Lazarus has been dead and buried. And here Jesus shows up, and they raise their complaint again. If you had been here, our brother would not have died. Jesus does not give them an answer to why it took so long. He gave them a revelation. He said, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. God gives a revelation. My brothers, my sisters, there is a revelation of God for every complaint, for every lament. And oftentimes that revelation is something real simple. God is God. God is present. God is with you. God is sustaining you. God is keeping you. God has cared for you. God is carrying you. God is faithful. God is strong. Oftentimes that revelation is simply God is here. God is in the midst. Can I just interrogate one more person who had a complaint, who had lament, he really helps me out. There he is on the cross, hanging between two thieves, suspended between earth and heaven, and darkness falls upon the earth between the 6th and the 9th hour. The griefs have been laid upon him, the iniquity of us all he is bearing, and he has a lament because he's in the midst of the most painful experience he has ever had, humanly speaking. He feels isolated, he feels vulnerable, he feels exposed, and he says, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Why I'm feeling what I'm feeling? Why am I feeling this exposure? Why am I feeling this vulnerability? Why am I feeling this intense pain? Why am I feeling this darkness? Why have you forsaken me? But something happens. Something happens, my friends. In the midst of it all, God gave him a revelation. And that revelation was something simple. I'm here. I'm here. I have not left you. I know it's painful, but I'm here. I know that you're cut to the core. I'm here. I know that it's dark. I'm here. I know that you're feeling something that you've never felt before, but I'm here. And that's what causes Jesus, before he gives up the ghost, to say these words, Father, into your hand I commend my spirit. You're here. You have not left. You're right where I am. I commend my spirit into your hands. And with all of that, he died for the sins of us all. But then God raised him on the 3rd day with all power in his hands. And do you see now the disciples fearing and grieving in the upper room? But he comes in the midst. And then were the disciples glad when they saw the Lord? They were glad because they got a revelation. Jesus is right here. And for somebody right now, for the grieving among us, for the wounded among us, for the weary among us, I want to challenge you, bring your complaint to God. I want to challenge you to express your lament to God. I want you to know that God is enough God for every complaint that you have. He is the God who heals you. He is the God who is present. He is the God who is in the midst of it all. And so right where you are, with what has gone unsaid, what has gone unmentioned, what has gone avoided, what has gone denied, I want to challenge you right where you are, with courage and candor. Express that right now to God. Express what happened and express how you felt and how you feel about what happened. Express the miscarriage. Express how you feel. Express not being able to conceive, and express how you feel. Express the divorce and express how you feel about the divorce. Express the loss of your child. Express how you feel about the loss. Express the loss of your husband and your wife, and express how you feel about it. Express the loss of your parent and how you feel. Express the loss of your sibling and how you feel. Express the loss of a mentor and how you feel. Express the loss of that opportunity, how you feel. Express the loss, even if you're feeling the loss of time, and how you feel. God, I feel hurting. I'm in pain. I'm grieving. I'm tired. God, I'm exhausted. God, I don't know how much more I can take. God, I fear that if I'm just pushed one more, it's not going to be good for anybody. Whatever that is, I challenge you with candor and courage to express it. And here is what God would have you hear. He'd have you hear, I'm in the midst of it all when your life is hurting.
Yeah.
I'm in the midst of it all when you feel so undeserving. Don't be afraid and don't be ashamed. I'm right here. Call on my name. I'm in the midst of it all. Please don't worry. I'm in the midst of it all when trouble's all around you. I'm in the midst of it all when you feel you will not make it through. Don't be afraid. Just know that I will. I'll come to your aid. And God says, I'll come to your aid, saying just, please be still. I'm in the midst of it all. You'll hear God say, I'm in the midst of it all when your heart is aching. I'm in the midst of it all when your faith is shaking. I'm there when you cry. Feel my embrace. I'm wiping the tears that fall down your face. Don't you worry. I'm in the midst of it all. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. That's what the Lord wants somebody to know right now. I'm here.